You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You're listening to us on CBS radio station 1580 AM in the Washington, D.C. area, or you're streaming us on the web, WMClive.com, where you can also find links to podcasts of previous shows. And we want to hear from you. Tweet us at hashtag WMCLive or email us at womensmediacenterlive@gmail.com. Now, today's program is like a fabulous grab bag. 1 minute we'll be talking to a multi-talented woman named, wait, sit down, Dr. Goddess. Next, a lateral leap to one of the 50 most powerful women in American business. That's according to Fortune magazine. Then, if you think you know how to treat a sick friend, Letty Cottin Pogrebin will widen your eyes. Last, one of the most distinguished names in American journalism joins us, and laughs yet. It's a show with powerful fun. But first, we need to go inside the headlines. Now, the news is full of the court and DOMA, Defense of Marriage Act, and the court and marriage equality, and the court and the court and the court. An aside, by the way, the court conservatives, at least in current reporting, is arguing aloud with itself. If gay rights and marriage equality, since it's so popular, you don't need a court ruling. Then some liberal justices are saying, let it become even more acceptable and popular before we rule. The first illogic is like saying somebody being beaten up should not be rescued because eventually the attacker will tire. The second illogic is like saying the law resides not in what's just, but what's convenient and timely. But anyway, whatever the court does, everyone can agree that marriage equality and eventually full lesbian and gay rights will come to pass, and soon. Also, the other thing everyone can agree on is that this change in public opinion has already been happening at a record speed, to which I say, hooray! I also confess that this gives me movement acceptance envy. Now, Urvashi Vaid was recently a guest on this show, and she and I were talking about the risk of mainstreaming, and also the good aspects of mainstreaming a movement. But it got me thinking about how come this acceptance has moved so relatively swiftly, in the scheme of historical pacing, while the women's movement is still back fighting, currently North Dakota, which has just ruled that you can't have an abortion at the very second that you can detect an embryonic pulse. From there on in, forget about it. Well, I've come up with 3 answers, at least so far. First, the gay movement has been mainstreaming, wanting admission to, as Urvashi said, hopefully transforming or revitalizing such traditional institutions as marriage, religious institutions, and the military. Now, don't get me wrong. If any institution exists and somebody wants in and is being kept out, I stand with them. They should have the right to be part of it. Women have been doing the opposite. Marrying less, rebelling within marriage. The demographics show it. Women are marrying later and not at all. They're having children later or not at all or outside of marriage. By our very nature, our presence changes the churches and the military. So we're a perceived threat, not a perceived transformative and revitalizing force. Second, there are more of us. We are the majority of the species, so we're critical mass, perceived threat. And third, the presence of men. The gay movement is partly men. And whenever men are present in an oppression, whether it's race or ethnicity or lesbian, somehow it's taken more seriously, because if men are being oppressed, then it's a serious matter. We have to pay attention to it. Even if they're, quote-unquote, even gay men. Anyway, and meanwhile, since apparently all politics is not only local but familial, we need, meanwhile, each justice to discover, I have a lesbian niece or a gay nephew, and then it'll all be solved. Now, our first guest today is best known as Dr. Goddess, a writer, entertainer, entrepreneur, scholar, of American and Africana Studies, and an activist. Kimberly Ellis, Ph.D., engages social media with art, humor, scholarship, and politics. She's a famous tweep, a blogger, and an all-round Renaissance woman. Welcome, Kimberly Ellis, a.k.a. Dr. Goddess, to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much, Robin. It's a pleasure.
Let's start by talking about how you've ridden to the rescue of Adria Richards in this flap of yet another round of, profound sexism in the online community.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just as a general disclaimer, Adria is a friend of mine, so it makes rising to the occasion easier. However, I just think based on principle, I would have done it anyway. Adria was at a PyCon conference, and she was sitting in front of a group of 2 to 5 gentlemen. She overheard one of the gentlemen talking about tech, and she turned around and engaged in a conversation with him. Mm-hmm. He was with this group, of persons, or at least, sitting next to them. So they then went back to listen to the lecture that was actually about the inclusion of women and girls in tech and how to make a stronger, more welcoming community. Huh. So she sees a slide of like a little girl coding, which of course, makes her think of herself as a little girl and, what we should do for the next generation. And ironically enough, behind her, at least 2 of the guys begin making like big dongle jokes. So dongle is a technical term. So it's like sexualizing, a tech joke right behind her.
I see.
And I think that, then it became the forking joke, forking a repo, which is also another technical term that can be easily sexualized behind her. So she's feeling uncomfortable, and she's thinking, like, what do I do in this, large arena, this crowded area? So she decides, I have to do something. I'm sitting here in a session on the future generation of women in tech and making it, environments comfortable. So she stands up, she takes a quick picture of them, and then she tweets it out, and she says, "Hey, I don't think the dongle and sexualized dongle and forking jokes are not cool at a tech conference." Right. And she hashtags PyCon, says, "Somebody please come and get them." I'm 10 rows back; they're right behind me. So the PyCon people came and they talked to them. The guys admitted that their dongle joke was purposely sexual, and they admitted that it was inappropriate and that they would stop. So it was squashed there. Adria thought that it would be, pretty much over. Mm-hmm. The hailstorm comes from, A, there's a blog post that goes up. B, because their pictures were there. And I mean, hey, the Playhaven, other Playhaven employees recognize that their bosses recognize, hey, these are our employees. So they decided to do an investigation. Uh-huh. And of the 2 guys, one of them was fired. Uh-huh. And so then he went on Hacker News to talk about it. And he said, he admitted it, he apologized. And then he said, I admit that the dongle joke was purposely sexual, but the forking joke was not. And Adria just kind of, Adria, misinterpreted. And, she's so vocal that she engages in social justice. And by the way, Adria's website is butyou'reagirl.com. You know what I mean? So This is not anything new on her part. No. She's always been an evangelist. She's always been someone who's been an activist in that arena. Right. So, but you say that on Hacker News, and guess what? The hackers roared. They took down SendGrid's site. They attacked Adria's site. They were, it's amazing because the groundswell, the racist threats, the sexual, she was literally threatened, with death, go kill yourself, somebody should rape you, die, envy, just every possible, on her Facebook, on Twitter, everywhere, on her phone. So her friends, the very first thing we did was to make sure that she was safe because we know as feminists, as activists, that, some of these things are done just to intimidate you, but there's always a few people who are also unstable who will take those threats to another level.
Absolutely.
So we wanted to make sure she was physically safe first. But all that being said, the irony is Adria turned around and was fired by SendGrid.
That is breathtaking. And what was the reason given? What was the...
their reason given was that while she was free to report, they didn't think that the public shaming was okay. And since she was a developer evangelist, now her reputation among the evangelists was now, not a good one, and therefore she wouldn't be able to complete her job. And by the way, their engineers had to work for 14 hours straight to fix their site from the attack from the hackers. So I'm like, okay, so that's called kowtowing.
Yeah.
And it's still called cowardice.
And male bonding. And patriarchal bull, and a lot of other things that we could name, except we're on air.
And I want to say, in this space, what bothered me the most, I'm very proud of the people that spoke up. But a lot of the men passed around a article by this woman named Amanda Blum, who decided to take a 3-year-old grudge that something that she was upset about, that she felt Adria did at a conference, to then comment on this particular
dear.
And including saying, Adria's not a good person. I don't like her. She doesn't work within the team. She doesn't work within.
But it's not about that,
And worse, I took it upon myself to write SendGrid and let them know that she should be retrained.
Oh my God.
I told her, I said, you have broken every feminist rule in the book.
And invented one or two new ones, And
your actions were treacherous. I'm so appalled. I'm still not over it. You know what I mean? Because it's so wrong in every way. And guess what? This is what makes it even worse. The conference she's referring to, Adria spoke up and had an issue with the fact that one of the sessions was titled "Getting the Money Shot." Talking about how to get involved in photography. And in the description, it said, you can be as good as a porn director. If you make sure that you get the money shot.
Oh, wow.
Now, Adria protested that. Therefore, Adria is difficult to work with. Because she said something publicly about their public conference session at a public conference.
What do we do? You're both a goddess and a doctor, so you obviously know the answer to this.
So much work.
Yeah, I know. We've only got a couple of minutes left, but so I'm going to ask a really dumb question in the circumstances. But what are we doing about the real hyperbolic violence on the web? I mean, I know Anita Sarkeesian has taken on the gaming world, and they also hacked her, terrorized her, went into her games, destroyed her avatar. I mean, it isn't just an I disagree with you, or even a I disagree with you, you rotten bitch. I mean, which also is not necessary and not helpful. But it isn't even. It doesn't stop there. It goes on to death threats. It goes on to I mean, is it because so many of these folks are teenage boys? I mean, what in a flush of testosterone? What is it, and what can we do about it?
Basically, we need to be transparent. We need to expose these people over and over and over again. We need to not be silenced. We need to band together as feminist men and women and just principled people. You have to support these women and men. You have to believe them. You have to support them, and you have to continue to expose this internet violence, this attack on our culture, and really this attack on humanity overall. So exposure, transparency, and bonding together, we can do it. We can conquer this.
And also the daily dosage for sanity of visiting your site. This was Dr. Goddess, who herself is a Renaissance woman, a writer, a speaker, an activist, a blogger. You name it, she's done it, and continues to do it. Bless you, and thank you so much for being on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much, Robin. It's a pleasure.
We'll take a break here. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I'm Robin Morgan. And next up, something completely different. An activist who really got going once she retired. Retired from being the Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer for, wait, sit down again, J.P. Morgan Chase. After Hurricane Sandy, parts of the East Coast have returned to normal, but others won't see normal again for quite some time. One group getting volunteers and aid supplies to those who need it is called Occupy Sandy. made up of a coalition of Occupy Wall Street activists, community organizers, and technologists. Occupy Sandy is using social media and other software tools to identify and quickly respond to urgent needs among the hardest-hit communities. You can help. To donate or to volunteer, visit occupysandy.org.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
And we're back with Dina Dublon, retired but making good feminist mischief with such NGOs as the Global Fund for Women, and also sitting on the boards of directors at Microsoft, Accenture, and PepsiCo, and being a trustee of Carnegie Mellon University. Some retirement. Welcome to Women's Media Center Live, Dina.
Thank you, Robin.
You were included on Fortune magazine's list of the 50 most powerful women in American business. And since I know that you care very much about women and women's rights, that makes me very happy. We need women in powerful positions. Not all women in powerful positions, as you well know, are feminists or ally themselves with women. So I'd really love to hear what you have to say about the way the corporate world either has been resisting still or adapting to there being a few more women in power positions.
You know, I have had a long career of over 30 years, and I must say that there has been change and there has been evolution towards both hiring and figuring out how to retain women and allowing them to progress in the corporate world. So from my perspective, there has been progress. I guess what I would add is that the progress has been painfully slow, but that is not to take away from what I believe to be the case, which is corporations have changed practices and have adapted a different mindset in terms of what it would take to both retain and allow women to advance in the corporate environment.
What? Give me some examples of the form that takes. Is it having more women on boards of directors? I know that Norway, for example, mandated that half of all the boards of directors of corporate bodies have to be female.
I believe that what they mandated is 40%, but that doesn't matter. I mean, it's the notion of having a regulation that demands a certain behavior versus the more voluntary pace of change.
Right.
And I guess in the U.S., in the public, there are strong views about the cost associated with mandated behavior. Mm-hmm. I have come to believe that certain things will progress at a different pace only if they are mandated. I was hired into the bank by now probably 30 years ago to a large extent because of affirmative action, as well as a much greater awareness that there was talent among us women and that they needed to access that talent as well. And I say I was hired because of affirmative action because I was hired into a trading floor with a group of 20 trainees, of which 18 were women.
Wow.
So there was no doubt that gender played a role. It wasn't the only factor, obviously, in hiring us into the trading floor. But it was a factor, and it was very much an attempt by the institution at that point in time to say, here are all these women coming out with graduate degrees in business. How do we open up the doors for them to join a corporation, and in this particular case, a trading floor, which had very few. It continues to have less than it should have, but it had very few women at that point in time. So I do believe there is power in mandated change. There are costs and there is friction, I guess, associated with change that is forced. But there is, I guess, cost and friction associated with a very slow pace of change as well.
Exactly. Right now, there's a tremendous controversy over Sheryl Sandberg's new book called Lean In. Sheryl, of course, being the CEO of, or COO, I guess, of Facebook. And I know that you haven't read the book, so I'm not asking you to comment on it. She sometimes is being criticized because people assume that her advice is meant for all women. And in fact, if you are if you're working on a factory floor and you have 5 kids, probably her advice is less relevant to you. So on the other hand, if you're a young woman wanting to make it in the corporate or business world, it's of extreme relevance. And so I don't think we should criticize impose a one-size-fits-all. If that woman working on the factory floor were to write a book about her experiences, no one would say, well, but this isn't relevant to a woman entering the corporate world, Right. But I wondered, since the critique has mostly centered around what women should do. Some people have felt she's blaming the victim, this was a critique even before her book came out of that way of thinking, that the corporate world should do more and that it's not really up to women. If you had to assign a percentage of where, and I realize I'm asking the impossible, but you do the impossible all the time, Dina, a percentage of where the most change should be happening, would it be more at this point?
I guess I would. My general observation is that, and again, without having read the book, but my general observation is that, I guess, to succeed in the corporate world is going to be a balance between fitting in and standing out. And that's I would say, a lifelong struggle as to how exactly you put in the balance. At the point at which I joined a trading floor, the mindset was all about fitting in. So there was very little appreciation on the part of the employer that there was a necessity for them to change as well if they wanted to retain us in that particular environment. That recognition of the necessity for them to adapt, a men's world to adapt in order to allow women to succeed in that environment, has, I think that recognition is there. Are we at the right point? No. So it is, I would criticize the continuing emphasis on, when we talk about diversity, inclusion, the continuing emphasis on training women on how to fit in and not paying enough attention on what is it that men are missing in their ability to recognize and reward the talent that a somewhat different style of execution brings to the table. This whole balancing act, I think, is a balancing act that you go through as an individual, but there is also the balancing act that the organization needs to go through. And I would say that, again, not having read Sheryl's comments, that it is practical advice. That is, if you want to succeed in a men's-dominated world, we are talking, the more you rise in the corporate world, the more it is that way. It is less so today at entry-level and middle-level management, but the more you rise, the more it becomes overwhelmingly men-dominated. So there is an element of being pragmatic that says if you want to succeed, you do need to adjust to how that world is functioning.
Right. Well,
now,
just
that's what the end of the responsibility we carry? No.
Right.
But I do think it's pragmatic for somebody, quote, climbing the ladder,
Yeah. Just recently, we saw the case of, I think it's Melissa Meyer at
Yahoo.
Yeah, that's right. Ruling that people could no longer work at home, which is very hard on people who have young kids. When she, of course, had the option of having a nursery set up in the adjoining office. Will women change the structure, or will the structure change women? And that's true of anything.
I think women have been changing the structure.
Good.
I think women have taken on the responsibility of acting and influencing their environment. Have they done it to the, as a generalization, have they done all they could do? Have they done all that needs to be done? No. But then I don't want to put the burden of change just on the shoulders of women. I do expect women to be helping other women. I do think it is also to our benefit to do that.
Yes.
But to our benefit in that same corporate environment, but it goes beyond that, right? So I just don't think we can expect women to be carrying the whole burden of change. Now, was it correct for Marissa Meyer to do the change she did? I think there are, at least as reported in the press, she is trying to accomplish a few things, including the success of Yahoo and the ability to continue employing people through the success of the organization.
Well, as usual, you're a remarkably sane person to be as powerful as you are and have been. I don't quite know how you pulled that one off. And thank you, Dina, for being with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Thanks.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. The place where we put together little odd factoids and strange political insights and curl into a fetal position and gibber. This is a nice one, though, actually. Leonardo da Vinci invented the scissors. Did you know that? I didn't. And among the many words in English that Shakespeare invented are the words assassination and bump. This one I just love for its politics, and it's so surreal. The Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, has twice as many bathrooms as necessary, because when it was built in the 1940s, the state of Virginia still had segregation laws that required separate toilet facilities for blacks and for whites, and the government went ahead and positioned the head of the military offices right in the middle of that. Now, to make this even more hilarious, much later on, when women began infiltrating the military and the Pentagon offices, one of the reasons cited to keep us out was that they didn't have sufficient toilet facilities. Don't you love it? Now, the shortest war in history, bet you don't know this one, was between Zanzibar and England in 1896. And Zanzibar surrendered after 38 minutes. Peace now. The last two are really quite profound. The strongest muscle in the body is the tongue. Now, don't go all salacious on me. Think of language. And the word lethological, no, I got that wrong. Lethological, 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 describes the state of not being able to remember the word you want. And as more and more senior moments descend upon all of us, we are all becoming lethologics. Now, what was I going to do next? Ah, yes, break time. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I am still tediously, consistently, Robin Morgan. So you think you know how to behave toward a pal who's sick. Well, think again. With Letty Cottin Pogrebin when we return.
When it comes to talk radio, men still do most of the talking. It doesn't get too much better if you look at television, newspapers, film, video games, social media, literature, sports, and corporate or technology leadership. The Women's Media Center's Status of Women in the U.S. Media 2013 report details the persistent gender disparity in a range of media institutions that rank among the greatest influencers in American society. To read the full report, go to womensmediacenter.com.
listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
Welcome back. We are about to hear from an award-winning journalist, public speaker, political activist, author of numerous books, plus a new one we'll discuss, and, full disclosure, a colleague from the early Ms. Magazine days, Letty Cottin Pogrebin. Welcome, dear Letty, to Women's Media Center Live.
Oh, I'm so happy to be on with you, Robin.
Oh, it's like old home week.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to get right to this new book, How to Be a Friend to a Friend Who's Sick, which is out as a hardcover and an ebook from Public Affairs, and has 2 scoops of ice cream and 2 spoons in 2 little bowls on the cover as a suggestion for one thing that you can do is eat ice cream together with somebody who's sick. And it's everything from your relating what happened to you when you had the diagnosis of breast cancer and you were sick and what friends did and didn't do, to that inspired you to do this, right?
That's right, exactly. I was absolutely stunned. I mean, I've written a book on friendship. I thought I had pretty much mined the subject. And then I discovered when I got my diagnosis and I told people that many of them reacted in most peculiar ways, totally unexpected. Some became sanctimonious. Some pushed me away, pulled back, retreated. Others were constantly speaking to me in tones of doom. How are you? As if, you know...
With their head tilted sideways.
Right. And real sorrow in their eyes. Meanwhile, I'm trying to get better and think positive thoughts, and I'm constantly being asked, how are you? So that became one of my most annoying sentences, which is difficult because it's sort of the rudimentary opening line in polite parlance, how are you? And you grow to loathe it.
Yeah. Well, you know, just as you said, you thought you'd mind friendship. I when I first heard that you were writing this book, and then before I actually read it, I thought to myself, well, don't we all know how to be friends to friends who are sick? I mean, is that so hard? And yet you point out in very funny sometimes ways, and other times not so funny ways, of disastrous things to say, disastrous gifts to bring, and then the contrary. Give a few samplings of those.
Well, you know, all the cliches come trotting out, and you have to feel sympathy for people who really don't know what to say. So they take refuge in the sort of Hallmark greeting card thing. Ugh. They'll say, I'm sure it's going to be okay. Or they'll say, you look great. You really know you look like a pile of yesterday's oatmeal. And they say, God only gives you as much as you can handle. Or you don't deserve this, as if somebody does deserve this. It becomes almost comical when you I mean, the way that people sort of misfire immediately comes to mind this little anecdote I tell in the book about a man who visited his friend who had just come out of cancer surgery, and he said, how'd it go? And the patient said, great, they got it all. And the friend said, really? How do they know?
Oh, helpful. Really, really helpful.
Right. So that, I mean, even when people don't resort to cliches, they very often put a very large foot in their mouth.
Yeah. Sometimes I think that people visiting sick people, and certainly people going to memorials and funerals, are there for themselves, not for the person who's sick or the person who's departed. Well, obviously the person who's departed is free from giving a damn. But with a sick person, so much of the I don't know, the ritual around the visiting sometimes seems set up for the edification of the visitor.
Well, you know, that's true of a lot of visits in general. More often than not, I found that I really didn't want anybody to come. I wanted to be left alone. I wanted to read. I wanted to sleep. Mm-hmm. I wanted to think. I was with my family, I really couldn't handle a stream of well-meaning friends.
Right.
But people feel inadequate in the friendship if they don't do something. And what can you do? The only thing you can do is show up. So very often people are impelled to and compelled to. They feel, please let me come, you know, because then I'll feel like a good person. And what I counsel in this book is to please, please, please start out at the very beginning after you get your diagnosis and tell your friends what you want. Say real clearly, you know, I know you love me. I love you. You know we want to see each other. But please don't just drop in.
Right.
You know, I really can't take 20 minutes. I mean, if you're going to drop in, I can take 10. The sick person feels as if it's her or his job to kind of keep the conversation going because of the awkwardness of the visitor.
That's so exhausting.
Exactly. So so this is all quite counterintuitive. Emily Post didn't go in this direction. She was looking for the right thing to do, and as you say, it was the right thing to do for you, the visitor, to feel good. But for you, the patient, it may not be the right thing to do. Now, on the other hand, there are people who are desperate for company and need help and need their friends to rally around. So, you know, it's the absolute bottom line requirement of this situation to say what you mean and mean what you say.
This is what you refer to, together with other things, as a new etiquette of illness, and I think this is the best part of the book, among many good parts, where you set your standards and you try for real clarity.
Yes.
And I have found that is the only way to get through it. Otherwise, you're holding court and entertaining every afternoon when you really, really want to curl in a fetal position and nap.
Right. Yeah, and you need to think, if you're the visitor, you need to think about things like time of day. And, you know, if your friends' parents have just flown in from Costa Rica, where they live, you don't want to be there when they're there. This is going to be an emotional time. You know, leave them alone. Or if you've just had spaghetti with garlic and and peppers, you definitely don't want to sit too close. Even coffee breath can turn the stomach of someone who's sick.
Sure. It means basically that it's not all about you. It's about the person who's sick. And being considerate of that person. You also, when you talk about bringing different gifts, it's very funny. How could they possibly fill in the blank, have brought that gifts, like the bottle of wine or scotch or something that was brought to a guy with the visitor having forgotten that the guy was a recovering alcoholic?
Right. Yeah, because I think that guy had broken his leg or his arm, so it didn't seem as if, you know, you wouldn't perhaps bring a bottle of scotch to someone who'd had stomach surgery. But this friend thought, oh, you know, well, we'll party. And he broke his arm or leg, but so what? We'll party. But he completely forgot that the man has been a recovering alcoholic for something like 15 years. You know, and then there are people who bring great tomes, you know, huge volumes to somebody who can barely hold it up in their hand. I tell the story about when I sent somebody who came home from the hospital. I said, I'm going to do this great thing and give Gretchen Cryer, who had a new food business, I'm going to give her business, and I'm going to give my sick friend a week's worth of cooked meals. But I had forgotten that she keeps very strict kosher.
Whoops.
So, Gretchen Cryer is a Midwesterner who probably wouldn't know how to kosher a kitchen if she had to, at gunpoint. And, of course, these beautiful meals arrived, and my friend and her husband couldn't eat them. They gave them to the homeless shelter. They told me I should feel fine about it. Yeah. But I should have kept my wits about me.
But the book, again, is called How to Be a Friend to a Friend Who's Sick by Letty Cottin Pogrebin. It's in hardcover and ebook. Thank you, Letty, so much for being on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you.
It's time for another pause. I'm Robin Morgan, here with Women's Media Center Live. When we return, we'll meet a woman who is simply one of the most distinguished names in American journalism, Geneva Overholser.
Want to stay informed when there are changes to Social Security? Subscribe to receive automatic email updates on popular Social Security web pages with the click of a button. Just visit www.socialsecurity.gov/GOV delivery. More than 1 million people already receive updates to the pages they're most interested in. You can too. Look for the red envelope followed by a link that says Get Email Updates. To learn more, visit www.socialsecurity.gov/GOV delivery. Social Security delivers.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.
And we're back again with the professor and director of the University of Southern California Annenberg School of Journalism. Geneva Overholser was editor of the Des Moines Register, leading it to a Pulitzer Prize for public service. She's been ombudswoman of the Washington Post, a member of the New York Times editorial board, and has authored a number of books. And you know how impressive journalists are who receive the Pulitzer Prize, the gold standard in media? Well, she was for 9 years a member of the Pulitzer Prize board, and finally she was the chair of it. She was one of the folks who decided who got the prize. And she's warm and funny and a feminist. Welcome, Geneva, to Women's Media Center Live.
It's great to be with you, Robin. Thank you.
I want to throw at you a couple of statistics from the brand new, just out Status of Women in the U.S. Media report from the Women's Media Center. At the current pace, it'll take until 2085 for us to reach parity with men in leadership roles.
Boy, we can really cheer about that, can't we?
Yeah, that's a good one. By a nearly 3-to-1 margin, male front-page bylines at top newspapers outnumber women's bylines in the coverage of the 2012 presidential election, and they were more likely to be quoted than women are in newspapers, TV, public radio. The Sunday talk shows we know are a problem. One survey found 25% of guests only were female. 40. Now here we go online, and I want to talk to you about this and hear from you, because we had hoped new media, social media, would be different. 47% of gamers are women, but 88% of video games developers are male. Newer online only news sites have fallen into the same rut as legacy media. Male bylines outnumber female bylines at 4 of 6 sites reviewed. And then we're back to quote-unquote legacy media. I'm not ever sure what that means. Traditional, I tend to use. The percentage of women who are TV news directors edged up. Though this is one of the good news moments, reaching 30% for the first time. But overall employment of women in TV news stays flat. This is another good news fillet. The percentage of women employed as radio news directors is up, along with the overall percentage of female employees. In smaller markets, a radio news operation, however, might be just 1 or 2 employees. Men write most newspaper op-eds, but female voices are emerging in new media. And we outnumber men on social media sites, but we're interestingly also more on guard about privacy and managing friends and contacts. And then the last one I'll throw at you is women who just graduated from a journalism and mass communications program are slightly more likely to land a job than men, but they're also more likely to pursue work in that job in public relations or advertising. And because of this state in the media, girls are as young as age 6 are starting to see themselves as sex objects based on media influence and religion and a mother's parenting. And a happy good morning to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Robin. It was delightful, the prospect of this, but now I'm thoroughly
Now you're psychotically depressed.
I think that some of the bright spots are important. The strengthening of women's roles in radio feels important to me, because radio, I think, is underestimated by many, right? Radio is really on the rise in terms of importance, not only public radio generally, which we know is one of the few sort of traditional sources of media that we all are sort of praying for the continued existence of, however imperfect they may be. but also audio generally. So people are doing all kinds of work with podcasts. And so if women are rising in that field, I think it's important. I think the presence of women on social media is really key, because if women's voices are there, then it's up to us to figure out how we want to change the debate or how we want to enrich the conversation. Yeah. And I do understand that women may be more oriented toward a more private, more family. I'm not sure about the family part, but if they're more interested in privacy issues, they maybe not being public in their voices.
Right.
But it seems there's some kernel there. To me, the most unhappy truth is that we do seem to be replicating the paucity of women's voices and oddly enough, in many ways, the paucity of the voices of women, of people of color.
Yeah.
Although there are some signs that particularly African Americans and Latinos are overrepresented, for example, on Twitter and other social media. So somewhere out there, we have to begin to make true the promise of the democratization of these new media.
Well, I think we're fighting back in some surprising ways. Anita Sarkeesian is, I don't know if you've heard about her, but she's established a sort of fight back on. She's a gamer, and she critiqued the gaming industry for its, wall-to-wall sexism, and there was a barrage of vitriol visited on her, and her sites were hacked and everything. So other women online, bloggers, gamers, etc., flocked to her, and she's become a rallying point.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so there's that, and there is a podcast presence of women. It's true in alternate media. Yeah. And don't forget that everything that I read you was basically on journalism, because that's what you are. You're not even a gray eminence, but you're an eminence on. But
I am a gray eminence.
But the report goes into film and every aspect of media, book reviews, books being published, and we're not making fast enough progress on any of them.
What about on documentaries? It seems to me women are doing better.
Direction.
Right?
That is correct. That the Sundance report. We had Carrie Putnam on the show, and she was reporting. She talked about the findings of the Sundance report, which also I think was USC and Annenberg. And she women directors are increasing, I think, by leaps and bounds. But the interesting thing she said was that only in documentaries, because they have lower budgets. The minute you get into feature films, investors don't trust a woman.
Well, I do think that the fact that women in directors' roles in documentaries are increasing in number is quite hopeful, because even on the journalism landscape, documentaries have become more and more important in ways for people to tell long-form, in-depth, nonfiction stories that have such a power to change our minds about how we eat, or about, what our concept of social justice is. And, excuse me, so I do feel like that's a hopeful thing. I also wanted to note one other thing that you mentioned in the report. Women coming out of journalism schools you spoke about. Yeah. And I have to say the journalism school I run at the University of Southern California is, of course, way dominated by women. And they are wonderful young women, full of a spirit of change and hope, and many of them very courageous and driven by a desire for greater social justice, including for women's rights. So that gives me a lot of heart. They're going out into a landscape, of course, that is not nearly as welcoming as we would wish. But the mere fact of the numbers changing so much seems to me to speak of a hastened pace of change. I mean, I pray for it, and I believe it's true. You can only so long have a newsroom that becomes 60% women, 70% women, even with men at the top. That doesn't change.
Yes, it is critical mass after a certain point. And also what I find heartening is that they're coming in with a sense of entitlement that it took our generation years to get to. I mean, we knew what we wanted, but the idea that we had a right to it, we had to grow into, and they come in properly royally pissed off for all the right reasons.
Right, exactly. And they do have a sense of expectation that this will work. They have every right to be heard, although they're very much, as we keep saying in this current Sheryl Sandberg et al. Debate, they're very much concerned about how they're going to do it all, quote unquote.
Right.
And journalism has always famously been an enormously, as we all know, an enormously compelling but also time-eating enterprise. But now journalism can be performed in lots of ways, and people are putting together kind of portfolio careers. More and more of our students are behaving more as artists have historically behaved. That is, they burn with a passion to do the journalism, and they're going to do it whatever the hell. But they may actually make their money doing something less soul-feeding. So they're putting together lives that have more moving parts and more flexibility, which sometimes can be hard, but in other ways can be easier on raising a family as well as doing the work.
And it also means that then those women will be just inherently requiring more of their partners in child rearing. I mean, so it will have ripple effects of transforming their home lives as well.
Well, I just wanted to say that and I know this often can feel like, how many times can we blame ourselves, but whenever I speak with groups of women and women say, what is it we might be able to do to change the landscape, to have, and part of it is we simply have to feel more responsibility to speak out. I mean, as I've edited editorial pages and sought women's letters to the editor, the tradition has been that women are not as comfortable doing this. Women aren't as comfortable sort of opining in a less nuanced way. We don't like to pronounce, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we've got to get better at it.
Right. No, you're right. Gail Collins was on the show recently, and she was remembering when she'd been op-ed and editorial page editor at the Times, and she said, the terrible thing that one area we do control, which is letters to the editor, and women just don't write it enough, and also in the news cycle, which is now so fast, women lose out because we're more thoughtful. We take time. We're not as at home as just opining at the drop of a hat the way men are.
Exactly.
I may not know anything about this subject, he says, but I can write about it. Women are in a sense being punished but for being too thoughtful, but nonetheless that is what the news cycle now is.
I believe that's true.
Well, you've left me with some positive news, so I won't quite commit suicide today. And the vision of all those young students going out into the world is a very encouraging one.
Thank you so much for having me on, Robin.
Thank you for being on Women's Media Center Live. And now it's time for Fighting Words. We've talked before about gender-specific medicine. Marianne Legato was a guest on the show. We've talked about the Foundation for Gender-Specific Medicine and the Institute for Gender-Specific Medicine. And many of you wrote in and were very interested in that. And we're back on the subject today. There's so many examples. There's brain differences between women and men. Different research projects have recently shown some drugs work well for one sex but have little effect on the other. Morphine, for example, as a pain-suppressing medication, works better for men. We need to figure out why chronic pain tends to affect women more than men. I can see you smiling bitterly. It's because we're women in a patriarchy, that's why. Anyway, it goes on. Mental health is another area where real brain differences exist. Drug abuse is a third area because drugs affect us differently. But the problem is that the research comes from studies of male animals and male human volunteers. As Professor Jeff Mogil from McGill University said, and he is one of the researchers on pain differences, he said, quote, "It's scandalous. Women are the most common pain sufferers, and yet our model for basic pain research is the male rat." Now, the most famous example of this discrimination was, of course, the heart attack study some years ago. The women's health movement had been pressuring, why were there no women in tests and trials? And why was it consequently assumed that women very rarely got heart attacks? Well, for one thing, women present differently. We don't present with the classic pain radiating down the left arm. We tend to present with feeling nauseous first and other symptoms. After a lot of pressure, finally women were admitted into the tests and trials. And guess what? Today we know that heart attack is the second highest cause of death for women in the United States. All of which brings us to next week's program, which will first air and stream on April 6th and be accessible and downloadable by podcast thereafter. April is Parkinson's Disease Awareness Month, but we've all been unaware of how PD especially affects women, and also men of color, because the vast majority of patients recruited for clinical trials are male and white. So where does that leave us regarding how PD affects women? Like, for example, our 3 guests next week, a neurologist, a caregiver, and a woman with Parkinson's. And also, how it affects me. Yes, next week I'll be coming out to tell the personal story of what happens when a writer who is also a feminist activist takes on a diagnosis of Parkinson's. A media-first, intimate, revealing. There's never been a show quite like what we plan for next week's program. And that's it for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS station 1580 AM radio in Washington, D.C., and on the web at WMClive.com. Remember to email us at womensmediacenterlive@gmail.com. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and for this program Executive Producer Julie Burton, Senior Producer Crystal Williams-Chancellor, Technical Director Michelle Kinsey-Bruns, and our founding sponsor Regina Kulik-Scully. I'm Robin Morgan. Thanks for being with us. Mark your calendars to join us next week for a memorable program that will break new ground. Only here on Women's Media Center Live.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 AM, a CBS station.